Сегодняшняя конференция и эта международная встреча пройдет в рамках этого грандиозного масштабного проекта «Общество «Последний шанс» после конференции, которая состоялась 11 мая, одноименная конференция «Общество «Последний шанс», на которой собрались тысячи людей со всего мира. Люди сами организовали это грандиозное событие, которое состоялось впервые в нашей истории, и они подняли такие важные вопросы, которые волнуют каждого. И основной вопрос, который обсуждался с разных перспектив, это вопрос проблемы потребительского, эгоистического, материалистического общества. Ведь если мы, как общество, продолжим жить в таком формате, то у нас остается только два варианта, а по сути один. Либо мы уничтожим сами себя в ходе ядерной войны, либо это сделает климат за нас. Если на климат мы повлиять не можем, то сегодня в наших силах предотвратить сделать все возможное, чтобы не допустить необратимого. И сегодня мы как общество можем и мы должны создать условия, в которых каждый из нас, каждая жизнь может быть спасена. Поэтому сегодня мы стартуем эту международную встречу на платформе «АЛЛАТРА», и сегодня у нас присутствуют люди со всего мира за кадром, и сейчас эту игру организовали участники международного движения «АЛЛАТРА» из Италии. У нас также присутствуют ученые, очевидцы, у нас присутствуют специалисты из разных сфер деятельности, чтобы вместе, совместно и целостно рассмотреть такие проблемы, как почему действительно изменяется климат так резко, почему в потребительском обществе наука не служит на благо людям, на то, чтобы подготовиться к этим изменениям, почему жертвы природных катаклизмов до сих пор не получают необходимую поддержку и помощь. Ведь все это можно было бы изменить. И сегодня мы рассмотрим такой важный и основополагающий вопрос, как вопрос создания созидательного общества.
Because today scientists fix the changes in chaos on the Earth. Chaos is that temperature is drastically increasing in one part of the Earth and in some it's decreasing, and weather is changing, and scientists are already talking about the fact that many territories on the Earth will soon become unsuitable for living, and such countries as Saudi Arabia, Near East countries, according to forecasts of the scientists, within the nearest decades, the temperatures will decrease, and certainly these territories will be unsuitable for people to live. In addition, due to the increase of temperatures, the climate becomes drier and it becomes a problem with resources. We have problems with the accessibility of many countries to water, to potable water. This will increase problems between countries and aggravate the climate situation. Also, another important problem now is the melting of glaciers all over the world. It's a drastic increase of the world ocean, and this can cause such a situation that in many regions, especially coastal areas, will be subject to typhoons and flooding, and people will have to be evacuated from these countries, and there will be risks
пожары, наводнения, тайфуны, землетрясения. Все мы видим сейчас в эти дни. Но по большому счету общество в основном равнодушно к этим событиям. Кому это все нужно? По большому счету только близким родственникам и друзьям. А ведь завтра эти проблемы могут случиться у вас, в вашей стране. И завтра ты можешь быть в толпе этих беженцев. Ты будешь штурмовать корабли, чтобы пересечь океаны. Ты будешь карабкаться вверх, пересекать границы. И как отнесутся к тебе люди в других странах? Очень важно, чтобы мы все изменили, потому что иначе нас ждут тогда страдания. Поэтому нам надо принять решение и изменить общество. Тогда решать нам самим, что мы хотим: страдать или построить общество счастливых людей.
The changes which are happening now, they're happening much faster than it was expected, and mostly we speak about the nearest years, not decades, and facts are the best evidence of that. Now let's see the video which was prepared by the participants of ALLATRA movement, and we will see what is happening with our own eyes.
Здравствуйте.
Сан-Франциско.
Экстренные новости на АЛЛАТРА ТВ.
Проливные дожди, крупный град. Мощнейший тайфун в Китае, в Японии, в Приморском крае России. Ураган Дорин обрушился на Багамские острова. В результате стихии пострадали острова. В результате сообщений ураган назвали катастрофическим. Данный шторм стал старым самым сильным за всю историю шторма. Порывы ветра внутри урагана достигали 300 км урагана достигали 320
km. Severest of the fourth category. 240 kilometers per hour the speed of
the После аномально обильных осадков в декабре на Аравийском полуострове озеленилась и зацвела пустыня. Песчаные барханы превратились в море.
Добрый вечер всем. В Альпудине выпал град, что нетипично, особенно в конце марта. В последние несколько лет мы наблюдаем следующие изменения. Продолжительность зимы каждые 6 увеличивается приблизительно на 10-15 дней.
С удивительным явлением столкнулись жители Мексики. 30 июня после сильного дождя с градом 6 пригородов мексиканского города Гвадалахара, 6 пригородов толстым слоем льда. Местами высота выпавшего града достигала 1,5 метра.
Принесший катастрофические разрушения и бедствия тысячам людей, разрушения и бедствия тысячам людей, и разрушения одним из масштабов года.
С вами репортер АЛЛАТРА ТВ из Ганы. На Малави и Мозамбике из Ганы обрушились сильные дожди, в результате которых страны столкнулись с масштабными наводнениями.
А на следующее утро люди обнаружили, что плотину прорвало. То есть они просто просыпались дома в 7 утра уже в воде. Я побывал в нескольких местах, и вода там достигает 2 метров и более. В итоге вода ушла, конечно. Но теперь у них ничего не осталось.
С вами репортер АЛЛАТРА ТВ из Атланта, Джорджия. Эта вспышка торнадо стала самой крупной за последние 6 лет. Сразу несколько мощных торнадо образовались одновременно. Порывы ветра достигали 250 км в час. Разрушительная стихия буквально напирала за основание дома.
Мощный торнадо пронесся по острову Хайнань на юге Китая. Максимальная скорость ветра достигала 212 км в час.
В префектуре Сага ливни обновили рекорд. За 48 часов ливни зафиксировано 427 миллиметров осадков.
С вами репортер АЛЛАТРА ТВ из Испании. Менее чем за 20 минут в Аргансе выпало 57 литров воды на квадратный метр. Сильный дождь сопровождался градом. На улицах образовались сугробы.
And snow and ice got even in the premises, turning them into fridges. And some pieces of gale were about like a baseball ball. The most refugees were the most suffering ones. People are settling in tents on the ground. The tents have been flooded, and the level of water was almost half of the meter. The river flooded, and the river went out of its flow and flooded the city. Over 3,000 houses were destroyed by water from Michigan to the south of country. Terrible pieces of houses were accumulating simultaneously. Since the last day, we just informed people. We were going around, we as volunteers, we are trying to help, we are trying to resettle people, to relocate them, to provide them with accommodation. Once they survived a flood, they have already fires. Forest fires covered the Irkutsk region in Russia. It's an emergency situation. Fires coming from the air and from the sky. The anomalous heat has increased, exceeded the 50-degree level of temperature. in Europe, in Japan, in Indonesia, fires in Greece. Southeastern part of Australia have seen the record amount of snow over the last 20 years. According to the 17th of August data, the snow level was over 70 centimeters. And most things are happening in Bhutan. This is one of the reasons why we have so many floods over the last year. 10 to 15 years ago, we didn't have any flooding. And the Everest, the highest peak of the Earth, has started melting. We see the melting of ice glaciers on the South and North Pole, and also in Himalayas. We know much more about earthquakes, volcanoes, and natural disasters in general, including the risks of climatic disasters which touch the whole Earth, and even the disasters which have caused by extraterrestrial causes like asteroids. But also we have the limits of our abilities. In many cases, the population knows that it's either impossible to do anything, and they kind of undertake a fatalist position, or they think if something happens, nothing will save them, or people are sure that in the society, in our technology society, everything is possible. Actually, we are in neither of these two positions. We have prepared this video. The participants of the ALLATRA International Public Movement have prepared this video, and participants of the project, the Breaking News, who contact eyewitnesses of climatic disasters all over the world. And people are telling about what they see with their own eyes. They share their experience. And our ALLATRA TV reporters, basically anyone can become a Breaking News reporter. And this provoked us to share knowledge about the global climate change on Earth based on the report published in ALLATRA, and also the information given in the programs with Igor Mikhailovich Danilov. These programs inspire people all over the world to unite, to consider the issues which are urgent for us today and find effective ways to solve these problems. Today in Neapel, we have one of the active participants of the ALLATRA movement and our participant of Breaking News. It's Giuseppe Mastro Lorenzo. He's the volcano expert. He is the leading expert in the National Observatory of Vesuvio, and also Giuseppe has an active life position, and he shares his observations and experience, and we would like to give the floor to Giuseppe to greet our guests, our viewers, and please, the floor is yours.
Senior researcher, so I work since about 30 years ago in volcanology, mostly on my volcanoes, the Neapolitan volcanoes, Italian volcanoes, including Vesuvius, the most important, and then Campi Flegrei, which is the most dangerous, and then Stromboli, another very interesting volcanoes, also for the effects that it could be caused on the Tyrrhenian Sea in case of a catastrophe, and then Etna volcano. So I worked also on a super eruption which occurred about 40,000 years ago in Naples, near Naples, in Campi Flegrei, and climate on the stratosphere. And so it is very interesting to study the relationship between volcanoes and climate. So I can give you my contribution about this topic.
Thank you very much. Sharing his.
Спасибо, Джузеппе. Мы рады вас приветствовать на игре профессионалов «Климат. Общество. Последний шанс». И сегодня в проблемах изменения климата на Земле винят антропогенный фактор, как будто человеческая деятельность привела к тому, что температура на Земле
повысилась. The problems of climate are attributed by people to the anthropogenic factor. Is it really so? And what the followers of this theory propose? We would like to give the floor to Sergei Chernomaz, the sales manager in Dubai, United Arab Emirates. Sergei?
Nowadays, the most widespread and cited cause of the climate change include changes in biophysical environments and ecosystems and natural resources caused directly or indirectly by humans. This includes global warming, environmental degradation such as ocean acidification, mass extinction and biodiversity loss, and ecological crisis. Global warming commonly refers to the mainly human-caused increase in global surface temperatures. It is considered a major aspect of current climate change. The term global warming and climate change are often used interchangeably, but climate change includes both global warming and its effects. The anthropogenic factor theory is based on research by the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, IPCC, which was founded in 1988 by the World Meteorological Organization and the United Nations Environment Programs. In December 2007, the IPCC was awarded the Nobel Peace Prize for, quote, their efforts to accumulate and disseminate wider knowledge of anthropogenic climate change and to lay the foundations for measures necessary to counter such change. So let's have a closer look to what the Nobel Prize was given for and what measures the IPCC suggests. So first of all, charge money for climate emissions, subsidize clean energy, electrify everything and invest into innovations and production and sales of cars, trucks and buses that run on fossil fuels, and zero deforestation and encourage vegetarians. So seriously, this is ridiculous as for me. Guys just wake up and look out of the window. What happened yesterday, last week, last month? We see everywhere earthquakes, floods, volcano eruptions, mudslides, and this list we can continue for a long time. But these international agencies continue making up plans on paper like we have 50 or 100 years. But the harsh reality is that we don't have. Max, what we have is 5 to 10 years. So let's have a look at the benefits that global society have got from signing the Kyoto Protocol in 2005 and the Paris Agreement in 2016. What changed since that times? Exactly nothing. Climate change just keeps its dramatic rise exponentially, and we humans doing what? Just selling here and there pollution quotas between countries. And all that governments are helplessly doing is just creating climate notification institutions. For instance, in Paris, they recently created the Climate Academy, and in 2016 in United Arab Emirates, they created the Ministry of Climate Change and Environment. Frankly speaking, I've just recently found out about the existence of these organizations. In UAE, despite the fact that the amount of rainy days increased, and for the past 2 years we've been seeing snow in some of the Emirates, it seems just in the media everything is quiet, people just continue living their lives, all we see is just some promotions, festivals of food, shopping, etc. So today, to sum up, at this unique conference, we have gathered from people, ordinary people from all over the globe. We have an amazing opportunity to find out what in reality is going on with the climate today, from mine and yours observations as an ordinary people. And we will see the facts that all the facts that were set up in the report on the problems and consequences of global climate change on Earth, effective ways to solve these problems, published in 2014 by Allatra scientists, and unique information which is given in the programs with Igor Mikhailovich Danilov. And the climate change is a cyclical phenomenon occurring on our Earth every 12,000 years, and is a result of complex astronomical processes. What is even more important, today we will explore the real ways how human civilization can survive during these times of global change and transformations. I give a microphone to Alina, who has joined us from Switzerland.
Thank you, Sergey. Спасибо большое, дорогие друзья. Я хотела с вами поделиться теми наблюдениями, которые есть в стране, где проживаю я, в Швейцарии.
An observation. So living in Switzerland, we see
Thank you very much, dear friends.
How the anthropogenic factor, this topic, is just being discussed. And they just pay attention, or take attention, people's attention on this factor, but actually just to the lie. So we see that this topic is popular because they want to make money on it. Because all these are just things are just absurd. So the scientists' opinion that they say that the scientists' decision to improve people's lives, the climate change. There is such phenomena as the scientists suggest that just to stop the glaciers melting, they suggest these snow cannons just to put on the mountains, and these programs are really financed and this just seriously studied, and everyone understands that actually these programs are not real. There are twisted costs, and they speak a lot about the global warming, and it's really upset to just to take people's attention on these things. And we just see that somebody constantly wants to make money on that. And you know, there was such a thing as the carbon dioxide tax on all flight passengers. And now, so they want to implement this tax. But firstly, people just use airlines not just for pleasure, But you know, the work migration is important, but of course, if you just pay this tax, how can you just prove where this money goes to? So just can we make a deal with the glacier that it would not melt? So in fact, we see all the absurdity of these programs. Yeah, and it just looks like they will just implement a tax on soon. And we see what's going on just outside. But you know, there are some people who want really to implement good programs like sun batteries. And of course, alternative energies are very important to implement. But why are they talking about that these programs are costly? So what actually good news? The government says that such an issue as the climate change really exists. And they talk about that although humanity should get ready for these changes. But just, you know, there is such a feeling that they pay attention to the details of the climate changes and not just, they don't give the large-scale picture of that. Thank you very much. We have just the global theory, which actually is inadequate. And we'd like to introduce to the scientists and to the specialists. Are there any real evidences that the anthropogenic factor is to be blamed? We'd like to hear our just independent analyst, Ivan Besvershenko. Can you hear us? Hello. Unfortunately, all the modern theories of focus
таяние ледников намного опережает расписание. Так, например, исчезают ледники, которые должны были растаять в 70-м году, а их уже нет. Недавно была очень такая пафосная церемония похороны ледника в Исландии. Он официально погиб в 2014 году. Самое смешное, что резкий скачок температуры произошел в 2015 году. То есть на момент, когда этот ледник растаял, rapid temperature increase and the temperature was changing, but not so rapidly as today. So the same was with the rise of the carbon dioxide. So if the glacier already melted up to 2014, so it means that it had been already melting for just a few years, minimum since 80s. And if you look at the graph of the temperature changes, so actually temperature rise began since 80s. So what are we talking about? Or what are they talking about? About 1.5 degrees increase. So what are they afraid of? Just this
the glacier actually has already melted. So what are we getting ready for what has already happened? So if you look just in general, all the actions that are offered today, all the government initiatives, such a feeling as if they just want to make fool of people. So they suggest taxes on cows and whatever, on cars and planes, and we're being banned just to drive cars. So maybe we should stop just even breathing. There is such an absurdity that they say that just to get rid of those greenhouse effect, we should just use horses, bikes instead of cars, and there is an interesting picture now. So the rich get richer, and when they talk about their private planes, of course they just don't want not to use them, but just mediocre people, kind of just usual people, they have to go on food, and so the rich get rich, the rich get richer, and their get armor. So who benefits from all this, and why is it so just presented? With what aim? So the picture really looks not pleasant. So who, why, and so in fact. Of course, it would be a good idea that people would be interested in finding the solution, how to survive in the upcoming cataclysms. Of course, we'd like to listen or to hear the view from Olga Malakova from Belarus. She's a geologist, and what does she think about that?
Hello. Climate is changing, we're seeing this. We are talking a lot about the rising temperatures, about the CO2 level rising. But at the same time, on the scale of the consumer society, of course, the human acts as a consumer towards the nature. There's no denying that. But if you compare the amount of heat and gases that oceanic backbones contribute, then it turns out that the human factor here is less than 1%. But if you have a broader look, and if you look at the processes that are taking place in the depth of the Earth, in the mantle, then the processes outside, the process on the sun, how they influence our climate, and even the changes that happen on Earth as a result of the fact that the Earth, the entire solar system, is passing around the galactic core. Then, speaking about the influence of the anthropogenic factor here is not serious. If we look into the past, what can geologists do? While studying oceans and land, we saw climate changed on the planet multiple times. There were times when the climate got colder, then it got more hot, and actually the glaciers and glaciers at different places can tell us a lot about this. And when we have the when everything becomes colder, there's a lot of water. It turns into vapor, and at the same time, the ocean has hard water, and based on the microorganism, based on the residuals at the bottom of the ocean, we can read all this data. Also, these seashells will tell us about the temperature that existed on the surface of the Earth at that time, because different species live at different temperatures. When we have intense heat dispersion, so continental rocks can be seen, and they are covered in greens. There are a lot of sandstorms, and the tracks of these sandstorms can be found in glaciers, and also, depending on the flows, we can find them at the sea bottom. Regarding climate, we can see, because glaciers are formed as a result of the natural phenomena occurring on Earth, we can also see there volcanic eruptions, the results of these volcanic eruptions. We can see how temperature changed, and actually the CO2 levels were rising in the history of the Earth multiple times, actually more than what we see today. And as a result of all these changes, as of now, because of all this research, we can say that the climate was changing in a cyclical pattern on Earth, and it happened multiple times. Now, we are living in an era when we have two phases changing. So the cycle of 12,000 changes and 100,000 cycle is renewing as well. And I mentioned a lot about it in our first conference. Recently, Antarctic had a there was basically there was a big hole drilled in the ice, and we can see, based on the results of this drill, that Earth experienced 8 times of climate being colder. Prior to this drill, we knew about just 4 climate changes. And analyzing these results, I can say the following. Cycles happened differently on Earth. So it got cold quite slow, and the temperature rose quite fast. Now we're living in an era of when the temperature is as high as possible. During the freezing time, the level of the ocean was below 120 meters. And now we're in the heating point. We are at the turning point. Imagine. So 100,000 years we were living in one cycle, and now we have global changes on Earth. Tectonic and volcanic activities on the rise, and it is happening quite quickly. There is no way for us to influence this. What we can do, we can get together, we can unite, try to understand each other and help one another, and only this will be able to live through these difficult times. I give the floor to Svetlana Vakhtina in Moscow. She's an engineer and electrician. Thank you very much, Olga. Actually, yes, the
things that we given are not disputable, but unfortunately today's science doesn't see or doesn't want to see and supports some scientists support the theory of the anthropogenic factor. So how did it all start? Actually, it started in 1998 when the IPCC created or formed this so-called it's international group of experts on climate changes for IPCC. It's actually the UN body, and this group doesn't doesn't give studies, but it accumulates or just all the data. They analyze all this climate data and they make conclusions about the climate state today. So today there are 195 countries participants, and their studies they just published in the form of reports. So actually there have been already 5 reports, but one of the popular ones among them was their report on global warming up to 1.5 degrees. So this report definitely stated that if we just keep the temperature just within this norm, then everything will be good, and all this global climate change would stop, and we might relax. So since then, they started concentrating on those 1.5 degrees. So what was interesting that when it was then this report was presented, there was a Nobel Prize Day, and so an American economist, William Nordhaus, he was the first to introduce or to implement this greenhouse gas emission, just to tax it. So now, as you understand that since then they have been making good money on those greenhouse gas emissions. And also another point was about hockey, so-called hockey stick graph. It is a graph. This graph shows that at the end of the 20th century, there is just rapid increase in temperature, and so the supporters of this anthropogenic factor, they say this. So the more we emit carbon dioxide, the more temperature rises. But actually, this graph is doubtful, because there have been lots of discussions about it, and the scientists, they say that they didn't get such data. So, and the most scandalous point was that actually when people get to know about the information of that happened, they stated that some data in this graph was really kind of made desired, but not true. So if you're interested, you might find this information on the internet. And you know, this graph, hockey stick graph, has become such an impulse, kind of illusionary just competition, that today all the governments, they just try to keep to that 1.5 degrees. And even the UN summit on climate in 2019. So what's interesting about that? 77 countries, they stated that they were planning to decrease those gas emissions. Of course, it's very important that in such a way we should just improve our climate. But each of the scientists stated that they do observe climate changes, the temperature is rising, and the conclusion was we can keep to that 1.5 degrees, but to stop that climate changes is not possible, because it's like, you know, we are wearing pink glasses that it's just senseless. So and at the background of that competition, some countries were complaining, when some island countries were complaining, they said, why we are emitting less carbon dioxide into the air, but why are we paid less? Why aren't we just compensated? So, but how will it help? Can we really pay to the hurricane, or just to stop it from spreading? And I can make a conclusion out over this, that today really it's like on purpose they change our focus from the real reasons of the climate changes. So the attention is being drawn from the main reasons to the minor ones. And I would like now to give the floor to Vladimir Melnik. He is a financial consultant of the international company, and he's going just to open our eyes on the financial side of.
Greetings, can you hear me? Thank you, Svetlana. Indeed, you're right. In the consumer society, even on such a vital important topic as global climatic change, people try to earn profits. And first of all, those people who have been endowed with the rights to resolve this issue. And the market of selling quotas on CO2 emissions to the atmosphere are an example of such fraud. Let's look into how it works and what quotas are in fact. Quotas are fractions of a whole, and today one quota equals to 1 ton of emissions to the atmosphere. For instance, if a company emits 50,000 tons, it should purchase 50,000 quotas, and all emissions within the purchased quotas are subject to penalties. And the idea is to distribute as many quotas among countries as possible, and to gradually increase the amount of quotas. So companies and countries have to decrease the emissions. For instance, if a company cannot decrease the emissions, he can purchase more quotas in the market where the price is determined by the supply and demand. And all money earned on selling quotas are allocated to implementation of environmental project, on decrease of CO2 emissions into the atmosphere, on investment into green technologies. And basically this is good for development of the economy, but the question arises how this can stop the global climate change. And many scientists today openly say that this greenhouse effect is not a theory, it's just a blunt trick, a fraud and deception. And the former president of the Academy of Sciences of the USA was fighting against this theory, and there was a joint petition signed by 17,000 scientists from the USA. Also, the Russian Academy of Sciences publicly states that there is no scientific grounds for this theory, and at the same time, by means of at the expense of these funds which have been accumulated from selling quotas, they fund scientists who support the anthropogenic effect, the greenhouse effect, and basically an artificial public opinion is formed, based on which countries and companies are being influenced, which have undertaken not to decrease CO2 emissions into the atmosphere. Basically, this is a banal business project which does not produce anything, no goods, no services, but sales is taken, it's actually a sales of the ear, and this kind of an indulgence sales in the Middle Ages. For example, when a person wanted to commit a sin, he had to buy a certificate which exempts you from this sin. And the same is with these quotas, which actually allow you to commit a sin. Basically, global leaders clearly understand that this process is a tried pumping of money from companies and countries and redistribution of influence over the world. For example, the USA have cancelled its participation in the Paris Agreement, Paris Treaty. Russia does not hurry to develop the quota market in their country, but despite this fact, the quota market on CO2 emissions to the atmosphere is actively developing, and every year many more and more countries become participants of this process. For example, in 2016, the aggregated revenue of selling quotas have come up to $30 billion. This is an additional financial burden which ordinary people have to carry, who basically purchase goods and services at higher prices. But if we put aside the financial part of this deception, we will find a very important aspect here, the fact that humanity is offered a false way out of the situation. Basically, the Paris and Kyoto treaties are offering to fight the consequences, and this way the development of green technology can affect, for example, the reactions which take place in the Earth's core or in the magnetic field of the Earth, the Earth's orbit trajectory or the trajectory of the solar system movement. And these are the changes which we are currently observing. The cause of these changes is cyclicity, and humanity cannot influence this in any way. And so some kind of a deadlock offers are proposed, and the society is drawn into a dead end. But global elite actively purchases territories in relatively safe regions of the earth, and they build underground bunkers, cities, understanding that within the nearest years our civilization will face more global cataclysms, more powerful ones. And here a question arises: whom we entrust our salvation with, and how long we will be observing silently what is happening. Society can unite, and it will be capable of anything, and it's very important to ensure active position of every person. Thank you very much. I give the floor to Vitaly and Igor Naumets, candidate economical science, honored constructor of Ukraine. Thank you. We are living in an artificial society where basically emission of money is performed by the Federal Reserve System of the USA. Basically, it's a private organization, the shareholders of which are private persons. These are so-called owners of money. And basically, what we have is that in the modern world, it's very easy to initiate an economic crisis. All people say that the society is in a dead end. The amount of, subsidies and inflow of money into economy doesn't help, and we see that economy all over the world is aggravating. It's kind of an anesthetic which we use to try to reanimate a dying person. Economists say that it's a large-scale economic crisis which is ongoing, or we will face the war, and all this causes suffering. But do we need suffering? And is there any other way? There is. We offer, on our conferences, we offer to initiate a limited capitalization at the amount of $10 million per each family. Just think of this. If we don't take such measures, we will see what is happening right now, because money is accumulated in private hands. But if a person has a great amount of money, he can buy anything. He has already purchased everything possible. What's next? What his consciousness will care about power over people, over humanity, over society. Of course, money for these owners of money is not the most valuable thing. The most valuable thing is global governance, global sovereignty. And do we need to leave for the sake of these owners of money? No. We can do everything without any wars or revolutions. It's enough just to state our opinion. If ordinary people, I agree with the initiatives and with ideas which we voice on our conferences, like limited capitalization, abolition of taxes and loans. It's enough to just spread this information, tell about it, and also to attend the conference which we plan on May 9th, 2020. There are billions of us, and there is just a little group of people who are owners. The anthropogenic factor is basically used nowadays for business interests, but now I'd like to give the floor to Alla to talk about science, how science has come to this anthropogenic factor theory. Lately, over the last years, globally and in Italy in particular, we've various summits, meetings and shows are carried out where climate issues are discussed. We have attended such show in Italy where they discussed the point that the influence of humans determines the climate change. Now, as participants of the international movement ALLATRA, we wanted to interview the curator of this show, but we unfortunately didn't get any answer to our request. Pope Francis also called humanity to think about climate change. As a way out, he offers to switch to alternative energy sources, but is it really efficient? Also, they say that the anthropogenic factor influences climate, but is this really so? Yes, the anthropogenic factor exists, but this is not the main cause. The main cause is cyclicity, cyclic processes. We need to direct all our efforts to enhance moral qualities in our society, moral qualities of every person. We have to talk more about morals and ethical qualities of people. We will better redirect our funds on unification of people, on friendship. There are many, many good people all around the globe. And for example, if we take Italy, this country is a leader in the world in terms of volunteering. This means that people in our country, very many people are ready and willing to do something for society and not for themselves. And also, if there is such a platform currently existing already, this is the platform of the ALLATRA International Public Movement, where it's possible for people to unite regardless of religious or political views, regardless of their social status, regardless of, so ordinary people can unite in order to talk about these problems and issues which are already pending and urgent, and we can jointly come to certain conclusions, and we can adopt a joint vector of development for our society. On 11th of May 2019, an international conference was held of the global scale where over 140 countries participated. They were ordinary people who talked and declared what is happening around, and they came to the joint conclusion that it's time to act. In a year, on May 9th, 2020, there is the initiative to carry out and gather together on the platform on ALLATRA to unite the entire humanity in order to, find a common way out of all this terrible situation. Climate change, which is now being observed, and the changes which will happen in the future, these are not 30-40-year cycle. These are global changes which await our entire humanity. these changes can cause global migration, and for this we have to unite. 6,000, for 6,000 we've been divided. Borders have been, they divide us by borders, although everyone understands that it would be much easier to live without borders. We are divided by status, although everyone understands that all humans are equal. We are divided by religions, although everyone feels inside that God is one. Behind the closed doors, they solve everything for us. We have delegated our power to some people. We have delegated the right of our choice. And now we're trying to find someone to blame for what is happening on the planet. You see, even when you just tritely lie on the couch with a gadget in your hands, you comment something, you discuss something actively, what is happening around the globe. But you know, everyone, each one of us has this responsibility for something to change in our society. We initiate revolutions, we argue, we basically participate in revolutions which have been planned by someone who decides for us. Perhaps we should change this consumer vector, aggressive vector, to the constructive and creative one. Only on the constructive and creative basis we can come to some common joint conclusion. Thank you. Thank you very much for your words, for your understandings, which have united all of us on this meeting. I'd like to draw your attention to the fact that basically climate topic is very actively discussed. Many congresses, conferences, summits are taking place on this problem, and scientists and all heads of the states come together, the leaders who try to resolve these issues. But if we look honestly, and that's what we're trying to do today, is there any efficiency of their decisions? What actually have happened in our society, in climate? Have anyone succeeded to influence it, at least to change temperature within 1 or 2 degrees? Not many people think that all these summits and congresses are carried out at our expense, at the expense of taxpayers, of those who participate in the life of the society. And these are enormous money. Then also, if we look, volunteers. There are volunteers of our movement all over the world who are not indifferent to the situation in climate, in society. How can a person participate? How can he or she draw his attention and direct his attention to what is happening? This is not only what you have faced in Italy, but all our participants faced a situation that all these official conferences are closed. You have to be official participant, you have to pay an entry fee, and which is highly expensive. Although these issues relate to all of us, today our conference and basically all ALLATRA platform conferences are volunteer events. These are free meetings. These are what people are doing themselves. We are living in the 21st century where technologies enable us to do this. I'd like also to go back to the problems of the consumer society and how it is influencing science today.
Once again. Today, since we are looking at the problems in the consumer, materialistic, egoistic society, it also concerns the society. I mean the science. And instead of caring for people, there are a lot of economic interest behind it. And that's why our question would be, how do you think, is there enough attention and financing paid to the science, for example, for cataclysm or such suddenly events like, for example, eruption of Conflagration? Suddenly events like...
Very interesting question. So science is a very hard work. So scientists have to find a compromise sometime between their research and founding and government and so on.
This is why, since some tens of years, I am denouncing the fact that in spite of our knowledge about the risk in this area, which is the most dangerous in the world, there is an emergency plan. So
we are sitting.
Yeah.
In fact, we are sitting on a conflict territory.
We are exactly on two volcanoes in the middle of a wide volcanic field. Vesuvius is on our left and Campi Flegrei on our right. And the science level is very high. So we know a lot about the past eruptions and about the climate. We also, as geologists, we know the long-term climate change due to several factors, including the rotation of our solar system around the galaxy, as well as the change of Earth axis and other facts, including the global tectonics. And the detail is relatively high. So we know that sea level is continually increasing in the last centuries. Here in Campi Flegrei, about more than 20 years ago, I carried out a research on the sea level change due to the combined effect of sea level change due to the global sea level change and the local tectonic due to the caldera dynamics. So Campi Flegrei is a very active caldera. So it is mostly subject to a sinking and then an uplift, which is called a bradisism. And so we know that the sea level changes continuously. The problem is that the tail of the last a couple of centuries, since the increasing of CO2 production due to human activities. So this is, for some aspect, this is still an open problem. However, the science is very, very active in this sense. But going back to the volcanoes, we know, in this case, we know that there is a risk because these volcanoes have been active in the last tens of thousands of years with even very large volcanic eruptions, like the one occurred 40,000 years ago, the so-called Campanian Ininbrite, a single eruption which produced something like 100 times the volume of the Pompeii eruption of Vesuvius in a couple of days. In an eruption like this, a lot of fine ash and gases are directly injected into the stratosphere, and this can cause a volcanic winter, which is similar to the nuclear winter. So one of the spectrum of the last century was the risk of some thermonuclear war, which can produce a lot of ash and gases, which can which can represent a screen against the solar radiation.
So how predictable it is?
It is inverse. It is inverse to the global warming. This is the winter. So we know that in the past we have had many events, like many events of volcanic winter. But if we consider that for a so simple, relatively simple risk like the one of an active volcano, a million of people living in the area exposed to the risk of this volcano, there is still not an emergency plan. What what I denounced in the past century, in the past tens of years, in the past decades. This is an evidence of the fact that even good scientists, scientists which have no compromise with the business, have to fight against some of some aspect of the society. So politics, other interests. For example, people here in Naples are very much interested in realizing new buildings. And so probably the administrator and responsible and officials receive these, have a clear idea of this priority. So sometimes the business starts from the base. So the request of the general, the general request, the business are probably are driven by the people in its totality, consumers. So for the global warming, some denounce that many countries want to consume more and more energy, and so we cannot stop their activity, their development. And so, for example, in the past, I remember there was somebody convinced that there was some secret project to make a screen in the stratosphere by using aircraft and producing these how to say chemical.
But Dr. Mastroiannis, isn't it much more important to pay attention to preparation, because we cannot influence volcanoes,
this is a problem. So we know the risks. We know the natural risks. The problem is not that we don't know the risks. So we had many disasters in Italy in the last years, earthquakes, flooding, some eruption, not so strong. Last month we had a relatively stronger eruption in Stromboli, and we know that Stromboli is ready for a catastrophe at any time, because we know that the northwestern sector of Stromboli can collapse at any time and produce a tsunami, which can impact in all the Tyrrhenian and probably all Mediterranean Sea. I was responsible for monitoring this volcano in the last crisis, which occurred in 2002, 2003, and the flank was sinking very rapidly. And so we were ready for a tsunami in this.
Are people really ready for it?
Yeah.
People really ready for it?
Yeah. The problem is that this phenomenon may occur at any time, as well as a large-scale eruption can occur at any time. So we must change our approach to risk. We must prepare the people with a very detailed communication information about the risks, and to change their approach to the life. So we must think to the present, but also to the future. So the ethic may be applied to may be extended to the future generation. And unfortunately, I don't think that, so in spite of the development of the science, we are more or less in a prehistoric time. So we are probably Neanderthalian as approach, even if we have science, very effective scientific development.
We'll come back to this topic because you mentioned the science. If I may, I would like to share my impression for coming to Naples because it's our first time for many participants today. Dr. Mastrolenza, I'm just not astonished. I'm shocked. Because while flying under the Naples, you see the Vesuvius on the left side, and you see that people are settled down, just practically on the volcano. It is unbelievable where is this feeling of feeling danger that is, you're sitting, it's just really under the feet. It's how people living here for centuries. Where is this caring for our lives, for our value of life? Where is it? You see, there are millions of people living here. And when you say there are no evacuation plans, and we will come back to this question again, how is it possible? And you already answered this question, the consumer attitude, where is the value of life? And so these impressions, I hope it will also change the attitude to science, not only of scientists, because you are here and you are active, you asking, talking to people, but also the Napolitanians who live here, who would also take care of their lives, because none of other people, nobody will do that for them. So we have to be active. And we will proceed with the topic of science.
Спасибо огромное, Джузеппе. Поскольку мы коснулись раздела науки, хотели бы передать слово Елизавете Хромовой, геологу из Москвы.
Towards getting ready to global climate change. But what is modern science doing right now? I would like to introduce my colleague, Alexandra Ignatieva, engineer, meteorologist, climate specialist, and we will speak about the topic of the consumer format in the scientific research. And I would like to tell you about an interesting phenomena which exists in the world. So there is the expression called the British scientists have proven, the British scientists have found. The thing is that the British researchers are writing a lot right now. So now in the Russian language, the expression the British scientist means something ironic. The British scientist means some crazy scientists who focus on some research that nobody needs, and sometimes this research is believed to be false. So a lot of research is directed towards the so-called loud discoveries, and they're published and they're actively discussed, and at the same time they can be false. And the British scientists themselves have came to this conclusion. They have analyzed the situation using maths and statistics methods, and they have realized how their research directions are selected. So the British scientists discovered that the funding is given to those projects that bring the most screaming headlines. And at the same time, they understand that they must focus on that research that benefits society, and not to that research that makes screaming headlines. And the question is, now in the times of global cataclysm, is it worth to direct public funds to study these screaming headlines? And at the same time, we are the ones responsible for consuming these kind of headlines, articles, because, if there is supply, there is demand. If people read these articles with screaming headlines, then the situation continues. I would also like to add a few things. The thing is that the government spends a little time, just 4%, up to 4% of the GDP for science. 2 or 3 countries, and other countries spend 2 or less % of GDP. 2% for science, for studying nature. Now, This is happening now when the entire world is on the verge, on the brink, when when humanity is facing the choice whether it will survive or not. In the US, 70% from the money that goes to science is the money of private capital. So if it's private capital money, then the question is, what tasks does this private capital, what task does it have in front of the science? The tasks of generating quick profit. Another comment. How is this percentage distributed? How are grants distributed? My friend, also a meteorologist, and she used to work in the Ministry of Science and Education, and she shared the following with me. It is very important. So the projects that are truly important for studying different phenomena receive no money because of the fact that scientists were unable to file the application in the right way. In other words, who receives this grants? Those people who have a big name. Those people receive these grants who generate a quick profit, or who whose works are highly praised. And you know how this appraisal is formulated? It is formed based on the number of articles published in scientific journals and not on the benefit of society. So to understand it correctly, that those projects are funded that have more references in the scientific world. A lot of research is published on those web pages that are paid, and also a lot of research are written in a very complicated language. Another problem is that there are high technology studies, but they are hidden, or just a small percentage of people benefits from this kind of research, those who can afford it. Unfortunately, the ethics in science is secondary, to say the least, and the future of the entire humanity depends on where science goes. Depends on whether scientists make screaming headlines or whether they're focused on developing society, on creating methods that will be able to forecast and help the entire mankind to survive. Yes. Yes. I would like to say a few words about forecasting. So nothing has changed. So let's look at Dorian hurricane. So this Dorian hurricane was just on the above Bahamas, and scientists were unable to predict it. Why were they unable to predict it? Because they see the visible phenomena, and they want to know nothing about what is happening in the invisible world. In other words, in order for our scientists to be able to do something, they must broaden their horizons, broaden their outlooks. They must change their theories. They must step away from classic theories that they're using right now. They must broaden their knowledge and step away from the materialistic worldview. I agree with you 100%. Right now, science is at a dead end, and this dead end is the materialistic consumer format behavior. But what if a new stage of development of science is the creative scientist? In other words, when personal qualities of his sincerity, his kindness, his honesty, to help people, what if it comes up front? Because science is the method to serve all people. It is a benefit to benefit all mankind, because researchers want to help all people, and we have a way out. We can change everything. We can start by not being silent. And everyone must start with focusing each other. We have a way out, and the way out is the creative society. Yes, I agree with you fully. For us, this way out was shown in the report by ALLATRA movement on the problems and consequences of global climate change on Earth, effective ways to solve these problems. People study it and they translate it into different languages. And also ALLATRA volunteers have created a public platform which enables common people, but also scientists, the platform for everyone to publish their articles, to post videos, and any person, any researcher can join this initiative voluntarily and give their research to people. And this is getting together. This is unity. Thank you very much. And now we would like to give the floor to Olga Malakhova in Belarus. Thank you. The question is, what is happening in science now? Starting since 1990, there was a decreasing amount of money that was spent on studying nature. We're still using the laws that were adopted at the beginning of the 20th century. And people are receiving their Nobel Prizes even now for the laws in physics, say. And those researchers who work not for money, but who are interested in knowing the truth, those people, those researchers are disunited. And quite often they're lacking money to even participate in joint projects, because this requires money to publish their articles and even just to talk to one another. These researchers are unable to do that because they are not united. But what is the right way to do this right now, when climate is changing on a global scale, when this cycle of 12,100 cycles are changing right now? It is important for researchers to unite: climatologists, physics, astrophysics, biologists, microbiologists, and many other areas. It is necessary to study and forecast the processes and phenomena that are taking place right now. It is important to explain how these processes happen. It is important to help people survive this. New laws are necessary that explain natural phenomena. Platforms are needed for these researchers to communicate, to discuss things. And even one joint meeting of researchers of different countries will provide grounds for unification of different peoples than if you compare it with the years of diplomacy, and it will develop their thoughts, their ideas. And we, ALLATRA participants, are happy to provide this platform. Now I would like to give the floor to Naples, to Vladimir Aksenenko, Master of Science. Vladimir, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Olga. Briefly, today we've talked about the topic where the financial costs in science directed to, and unfortunately, if just to say it in general, today's science is in the elite's hands and is often used to maintain the consumer format of society, as well as mass media does. So, for example, if you need to spread a certain point of view, you should use the following mechanism. Almost at the same time, different publications in magazines by different authors being printed. But these articles, they are almost of the same contents, and they have the same conclusions. And you know, there is such kind of atmosphere being created as if this point of view is being maintained by the whole world. But is it really so? An example can be a scientific just explanation of Oklahoma earthquake. And you know that this state is situated in the center of North American continent, and this is considered to be a solid plate. So earthquakes can't happen there. But if you just beginning with 2014 and 2015, the earthquake magnitude increased up to 5.8. So officially, science explained that by the fact that in that region there was the shale gas production. And as a result, there were voids, and these voids were filled with water, and these faults were kind of the reason of all those earthquakes. But when earthquakes of magnitude 5.8 started to occur, so the reason for those earthquakes just is still a question. So actually, it's obvious that the true reason of those earthquakes is not conveyed and is kept as a secret by the elite, but thanks to the IPM, ALLATRA, thanks to the report of ALLATRA Science, we know now the truth that the reason of those earthquakes is the fault of North American continent is just lies along. But why don't people know about that? Why isn't this information being widespread in mass media? And why don't responsible people for that tell about that? But the elite, of course, keeps silent. But maybe people should stop silent and, just publicly voice that information. What is really happening to the climate today? So the way out is in our hands, and we shouldn't shift responsibility to other people, to the same scientists. And here another question arises: that one thing is that scientists, let's say. We are talking now about misinformation, or one point is when scientists know about this true information. So it's kind of on the one scale we put people's lives, and on the other scale just prizes for your publication. So if you are a scientist, what will you do if it concerns really your family? The elite knows perfectly well what's happening on our planet with the climate, but the question is, why are we imposed this myth of overpopulation on our planet? Doesn't our planet have enough space and enough opportunities to feed 8 billion people? And where are the science efforts directed to? Actually, today we can change our planet situation just within years. Why not to explore space? Why not to direct money on exploring the space? Why don't we just direct our efforts on creative processes and not to support the destructive programs? We shouldn't direct, or we shouldn't redirect our just kind of development as to the Stone Age times, but let's develop as civilization. And we are sure that when the majority of people voice their opinion, that we don't want to serve the elite, but we want to create. We want to make our own choice and to live in a society in which we want to live. We want to live in the creative and constructive society, and then the changes will take place in the nearest future. Thank you very much. Right, we have a comment by Dr. Mastro Lorenzo, as to the shale gas production.
In the last years, I was very busy because I had to fight against this project of deep drilling, even in caldera, to produce geothermal energy. And so I had to demonstrate that it is very dangerous because in many places like Oklahoma and other places, the drilling and geothermal production of geothermal energy may induce earthquakes and cause even large earthquakes. But what is very interesting is that all the Italian scientists and the director of my institution, the previous director, was a consultant of this society who had the project drilling in Campi Flegrei.
Do they know that they are sitting on the Campi Flegrei? This is a super volcano?
Yes, but I stopped this project because I demonstrated, I presented my criticisms to the ministry responsible for this activity for the environment, and I demonstrated that we don't know in accurate details the deep stratification in order to create this activity, and we don't know the relationships between human activity and disasters. So for the principle of precaution, we had to stop everything is not sure. So everything that we cannot describe in terms of possible evolution, and in most of natural phenomena, we are not able to make provision. So most of phenomena are not linear, but even as a very small human action may induce even very large effects. And now I'm still fighting against projects like this in central Italy, for example, in Bolsena Lake. There are other projects with my colleagues, geologists, expert as consultant for deep drilling in order to produce geothermal energy. Very critical area. For example, in Bolsena Lake, a project like this may cause the changing of the fresh water of the lake in water rich in arsenic, so lethal water, because. But this is in evidence of how critical is to discriminate between the scientific opinion, the correct scientific opinion, and the scientific opinion finalized to some business. So we have to make a strong control of these phenomena.
People, I mean, the citizens of Nepal. I mean, how do they let it be? I mean,
the problem is that in many cases, people are not conscious, are not. So the disasters or natural risks or risks induced by us with this type of activity are not a priority for people. So the priority of people in Naples are the job, the house, and if we consider health problems. So it is very difficult to convince people in Vesuvius area and Campi Flegrei that even if their generation can survive, because the eruption will not occur in next years, in next tens of years, future generations are exposed. For example, I studied the victims of Pompeii, Herculaneum, and I demonstrated that they were killed by extreme heat in a fraction of a second. But people absolutely didn't know that mountain was a volcano. So we are
about in the same situation. People, even if they know, they do not believe that their generation will be killed by a volcanic eruption. And this is a normal because of the priority, the priority of everyday life for people. But this is not normal and not acceptable for the officials, government, and scientists. And in many cases, there is a compromise between scientists, government, civil defense. This also because in many cases, the founding, I never asked for founding in order to be free as scientists. So my research was very hard to work.
Because you're also citizen of the
but I mean, also
I'm sorry. May I also pay attention because scientists, politicians, and citizens, normal citizens, they are all people who will be affected by it. It's not certain.
That's right. But everybody has a personal time scale for the action. For example, administrator thinks, okay, an eruption will not occur in the next 3 years, and then I will change my job.
And you can predict. Scientists cannot predict the eruption, but the administration can.
Scientists believe, okay, I have to work in my institution for 10 years more, and I have to produce research to publish my papers and to improve my position in the institution. The chief for civil defense thinks we have a lot of priorities, so then we think about the risk, the volcanic risk, and so on. And we have an example in 2009 when the L'Aquila earthquake occurred. So in that case, there was a trial, but in that case, the chief of civil defense asked to the scientists, please tell me if there will be if there is a possibility of larger earthquakes during a seismic crisis. So in a moment when the possibility of occurrence of larger earthquakes is higher. And according to the trials, scientists said probably there is not so high probability. So, and the chief of civil defense assured the people, please, you can go back in your houses. There will be no large earthquakes. This was a simple game. So they just played with the probability and say, oh, probably, even if they were not conscious of that, they say, but we know that large earthquakes exist, but not in my period of responsibility. And even if many my colleagues, scientists, love science and they love their job, then they need money. And you know that you cannot ask money to the government if you denounce something which is critical for government politics and so on. This is why since 20 years ago I was denouncing the risk for this area on the basis of my research on the violent effect of the 79 AD Pompeii eruption on the people. And the evidence from stratigraphy that many eruptions like that had occurred. And then I discovered another eruption, another Plinian eruption, which had occurred 2,000 years before Pompeii and devastated all the area around Naples, up to a distance of 25 kilometers far from the volcano. So in case of an eruption like that, about 3-4 million of people will be exposed to the risk. So I denounced in the National Academy of Science of the USA with this article the absence of an emergency plan, and then National Geographic produced a dossier about my research, And this created serious problem in civil defense because I demonstrated that there was no emergency plan. And the chief of civil defense at that time was asked to my president, please, you have to stop Mastro Renzo because he denounced that volcanoes are dangerous. And I insisted with my detention, convinced that they had to finish this emergency plan, which was announced in many cases as completed, but this was not. But still now, there is no completed emergency plan with an evacuation plan. But just money given for new project, new studies for vulnerability, for hazard, and new organization of the facts. So there will be some simulation of an emergency in Campi Flegrei next October, and this is comic because this simulation will be carried out in the absence of an emergency plan. So they will be, in case of an eruption, you will reach that square and wait, that square and that, but there is no evacuation plan.
Dr. Mastrorenza, I'm sorry. We will come back to this topic, yes, because I would like to ask one more question regarding the evacuation plans. Я бы хотела обратить внимание на то, что происходит действительно сейчас и в науке, и в обществе, и, как мы видим, доктор Мастро Лоренцо обратил внимание на то, что люди...
How Mastro Lorenzo paid our attention to the fact that people today, of course, are busy with just how to earn for a living. And Igor Mikhailovich Danilov in the program The Future is Now, the Climate Future is Now, just paid attention that he raised a question as of the consumer society. So really, we live in such times when we don't have time just to think about our survival. So these cataclysms may occur any moment, just at any moment, and we don't have even 50 years. But do we usually, do we actually use this opportunity to get ready for the evacuation? And is it just, do we have these opportunities for getting ready appropriately? As today we have many discussions, why is the climate being changed? And you know, the officials state that they may foresee and give forecast for the seismic activity, which is really astonishing for the scientists, as the eyewitnesses of these events, which actually have encountered this experience, and of course they have their own point of view. Of course, now I give the floor to Ekaterina from LA, and she would like to share her view, her experience with what she was encountered during the earthquake. So,
yes, hi everyone. Hi. Yes, California is the prone open basics, disasters, winter storms, high heat, sometimes tsunamis, and of course the earthquakes. So I'd like to tell about the earthquakes that just recently happened in the beginning of July.
На 4 июля 2019 года или июля 5
with the epicenter in Ridgewood, home to 28,000 people. It happened 122 miles away from Los Angeles. They were felt thousands of miles away from the epicenter and caught many people by surprise. Where I live, I felt it as probably 4 or 5 magnitude earthquake, and I live in California since 2007, and I already have some experience of 3.5 or maybe up to 5.4 And I know they feel probably for 3, maybe 5 seconds, but this time it was way stronger and they last somewhat longer, let's say 10 to 12 seconds. And a lot of people, they got scared. So these 2 earthquakes, they were unusual in some ways, I would say, because first of all, 2 big earthquakes, they rarely happen in the same area, one after another. And the second fact that surprised me, considering the strength, it was really strong and we have little to no damage. And I was thinking about that. Probably it is because the epicenter was in a very low populated area, but we know examples when such strong earthquakes happen in a highly populated area with the extensive infrastructure. It brings a lot of damage and it takes lives of many people. And just to name a few, the earthquake that happened in 1994 in Ridgewood, this is the part of California, it took life of 60 people and 9,000 people were injured. Or let's say the earthquake that happened in 1904 in San Francisco that took life of 3,000 people and 80% of the city was destroyed. So what do we have as of right now? The scientists, the experts, they're saying that we might expect even a bigger earthquake along the San Andreas Fault. And as Lucy Jones, the seismologist of Caltech, mentioned, we know it's going to happen, but we don't know when and where. And so scientists, they do urge people to be ready, to prepare. And we can't rely on guessing. We can't hope that next time it's going to be okay, because this time we were lucky. No one was injured. We didn't have any extensive damage, but we know that every life is priceless and we should do our best to not become victims of selfishness and carelessness in the future. We just forgot that our life is fleeting. And we may lose it at any moment. And all Californians felt it. It was felt not only by California, it was felt by residents in the state of Nevada and Arizona. So 30 million people felt the earthquake. And I think we should think about why we're really here. What is the purpose of this life? And we should do our best to become alive, to become truly alive. Thank you.
The same earthquakes that happened in California, the Katrina has reported the same Dorian hurricane that the citizens of Bahamas experienced. All these events, all these climatic natural disasters kind of behave just not usually, because the scientists that just expected their intensity to be less. And it was just, of course, surprising for the scientists that the natural disaster kind of just didn't touch or didn't cause lots of casualties. And the scientists themselves the answer that it's a kind of somebody regulates these anomalies. But actually, just coming back to us, do we make any conclusions out of that? So if you say just, okay, these people were lucky, but can they be lucky tomorrow? Can we just expect a better scenario, as Dr. Mastro-Lorenzen has mentioned, that people expect a better scenario of these natural disasters, as if, okay, maybe we can just skip it, or just nothing serious will be. But as it's very important just to develop the programs for warning people. So next question is how to warn people. And here, using the opportunity at the conference, so the participants, specialists in IT technologies, have joined us today, and they have their own view on how to just how to solve this issue, just how IT specialists having united can help the whole humanity. So we give the floor to Evgeny Kovalov from Moldova.
Hello, can you hear me? Okay. Due to the natural disasters lately, we have a very important question about how to warn people. During the last few years, the disasters that happened in the world, we know that we can solve this issue, solve this problem only together. And I would like to raise a question on what kind of warning systems are currently in the world, so people can cooperate between each other to save them during natural disasters, and why we don't have such technologies currently, or maybe we don't use them properly. And I would like to look at the experience of developed countries like Japan and the States that know how to act in such situations. From one side, there is a lot of channels of information, satellites, TV, radio, phone calls, SMSs, systems of air alert, and these systems are good for warning people like during hurricane disasters. But as it shows from the experience, internet, SMSs, they might not work properly during such events. And currently, the most effective way to warn people is to use satellites for that. And it turns out that all these technologies, from one side, these technologies are currently, we have a lot of disasters and cataclysms like volcanic eruptions and earthquakes that are hard to predict. And using such technologies is useless to predict such disasters. And using the current channels of connection between people and warning people is not very good for regular people, because the first ones to find out about the disaster are governments. And now we can ask a question, do we need such people that are in charge that get informed the first? And also, if to take a look at the warning systems of regular people, in some countries there are SMSs, in some countries there are cell phone calls, and during the disasters they might be overloaded. And also there are some countries that use the air alarms that was used during the Second World War. And we can ask the question, if this system works properly, and what do people know about what to do once they hear such alarm? And I have an example. I live in the Republic of Moldova, and I live near the seismically active zone Ranch, which is located in the eastern part of Ukrainian Carpathian Mountains and southern Romanian. And in this area, usually the earthquake's magnitude is 8.3 maximum. So, which means that if there is an earthquake, in the place where I live, it can become a magnitude of 6. And currently, if an earthquake happens, we have 40 seconds. We have just 40 seconds to save ourselves. And what can you do in 40 seconds? And as we can see right now, during the natural disasters and cataclysms, the systems of warning people, of alerting, they either do not work properly or do not give the required amount of time to prepare people to save themselves. And right now we need to find a system, create a system that will belong to all people, that will help to predict such disasters. And currently we have a question: is it possible to create such a system? And here I would like to give you some statistic data. According to ADC, this is an international company in IT technologies. They state that at the beginning of 2018, there are more than 22 million developers, computer developers in the world. And it's a huge human intellectual resources. But what do they really do? What do these specialists do in their everyday life? So what they do is actually they're doing business for consumer society. And I would like to ask them a question. Do they feel good? Do they feel pleasure from their work, from what? And I can tell you from my experience, the answer is no. If to just take a look at the way they came into the technologies, what they wanted to do, they wanted to create something. They wanted to do something that will be good for all people, for all world. And if these specialists, IT specialists, would do something good for all the people in their free time, if they could create a system that could save the lives of many people, including the lives of these specialists, actually. And I would like to say that currently the participants of international public movement already are united, and they're creating a lot of different projects, including the project in IT field. I would like to invite all scientists to the new project that will be held on the platform of ALLATRA. It will be a game of professionals, society, the last chance, IT technologies. I would like to invite everyone to this meeting that will be held soon.
Evgeny, thank you very much. It's an example of how we can use all our resources to get ready for this. And for this, we need a platform which already exists, which means that we already today can unite efforts and help all the people, help not just single groups of populations. Unfortunately, today in the consumer society, very few people think about what global role people must play in the future. I've paid attention to the following today. If the person just thinks about earning money for his family, it means that all our values boil down to material views. And this is why I would like to ask Dr. Mastro Lorenzo.
Giuseppe, you talked about the problem, about the emergency case is coming just to certain people, let's say administration, and they decide to inform or not to inform people. You mentioned also that they can practically predict eruptions or seismic activity, whether they will occur or not. So that's why my question would be, how do you think in such a consumer society with such consumer attitude and egoistic format in the society, how actually this decision will be made for people about the evacuation?
This probably is the most critical problem because you know, the perception of common people of a natural hazard is very low. This because natural disasters are relatively rare and unpredictable in most of cases, and are not in your life experience. This is why it is very difficult to make communication. For example, when there was the last crisis of bradisism in Campi Flegrei, between 1982 and 1984, I was just a graduate at the time, and I was starting with my research. So in that period, about 16,000 earthquakes occurred in the caldera, and an uplift of about 2 meters occurred in 2 years. In that case, because people had the direct evidence of the phenomena, people asked, what can I do? And most left the area, even if there was no advice from the administrator. In this period, even if you tell the people, oh, this is very dangerous, commonly people just consider this as a scientific information, but not a real problem. And this indicated that people just believe to the things that can see directly. This is why administrators, officials, and scientists must insist and also make, for example, simulation of the events and so on. But the problem is how to communicate and who communicate the risk and the level of alert and so on. In many cases, I make information in documentaries, international documentaries, because they are most interested to the reality of the actuality of the risk, because also national journalism often is controlled by the government and so on. So they follow the general indication of the government. And for example, when they ask, oh, you have a very good monitoring system here in Naples, because we have a very good monitoring system for the volcanoes and also for the earthquakes. I say, well, monitoring system is very effective in describing everything occurred up to 1 second before, but not for the next second. We don't know what will happen. And the major problem for the evacuation plan in this area is that somebody will have in charge the decision of an evacuation. And this is not a pure scientific decision, but mostly a political decision. This is the emergency in Vesuvius and Campi Flegrei is considered are considered the only two national emergency in Italy. So they will be in charge of the prime minister on the basis of the indication of national civil defense and scientists. And the problem is that we have no threshold. So there is no an absolute indicator of the imminence of an event. So the decision will be based on different opinions of scientists. If something, some crisis will start here in Campi Flegrei or Vesuvius, scientists will be asked by civil defense, please, something is happening, and they have to give their opinion. So in my opinion, the eruption will not occur. And the other scientists will say, well, I think the eruption could occur, but not in next few days. And another scientist could say, the eruption will occur by sure in a couple of days. So civil defense have to take a decision.
But you said that there is no ways to predict it. I mean,
there is absolutely no ways to predict. So we cannot make, we have not to make confusion between prediction of earthquakes, which is absolutely impossible by using our present instruments, and volcanoes with the forecast of weather forecast, for example, because in that case we have a very accurate modeling based on a near infinite number of evidence and tests. So every day we test the weather in every part of the world, and so the evolution of the weather on the basis of the change of the parameters, humidity, temperature, and so on. So we can make provision. In this case, for example, it is ridiculous that we say, oh, the eruption could occur, because the first question I ask to my colleagues is, oh, well, so you think the eruption will not occur? Well, how many eruptions of this volcano did you follow it personally with your instruments? No one. Okay, no eruptions. Because the next eruption will be the first in history of the science for Campi Flegrei, because the last occurred and was a small eruption in 1538. The next eruption of Vesuvius will be the first followed by scientists with instruments, because the last one occurred in 1944. There was just some seismograph, and also the volcanic system is very complex, because the system may be influenced by a very small change of some parameters, because the rising of magma depends on the temperature, pressure, density, gas content into the chamber, and then the state of the rocks around the chamber, and then the load of the volcano, and then so many parameters that we cannot describe. And we don't know the scientific, the physical relationship between these two parameters. For example, just in order to give you an example, one of my victories was when I stopped the project of deep drilling in Ischia Island. Is another volcanic area, an island not far from Campi Flegrei, very active in terms of seismicity and other phenomena, hydrological risk and so on, and volcanoes and eruptions in the past thousands of years. And in the case, there was another project for drilling in Ischia Island in order to produce geothermal energy. The consultant was always the same, the previous director of my institution. And so I had to fight with my institution, against my institution. In that case, in the period when I was writing my criticism to this project for the ministry, that then stopped the project, there was an earthquake near the place where the drilling had to be located. And in the first period of 3 days, the institution, the seismologists gave a wrong position for the epicenter, about 10 kilometers from the real position of epicenter. So in order to completely stop that project, I demonstrated, so we know in so high detail the rocks, the system, that we make error of about 10 kilometers for the epicenter.
So that means we don't know when the eruption could occur or seismic activity, in which place exactly. So we cannot be sure about nothing. So, but what's my question to you? How do you see the solution for it? If, for example, among the scientists, there is no let's say, unity in understanding will it occur or not. So the question to be or not to be, if they play, let's say, that really play with the lives of people, million people.
We must consider the different types of hazards. For example, for earthquakes, the only one solution is to be protected in houses which can resist to the earthquakes. Okay. Because you cannot make any provisions, so you in terms of mitigation or risk, the only way is to have very good houses which can resist to the earthquakes. About the volcanic risk, we know that the event is not so instantaneous that the earthquakes. So the first phase of the eruption can be relatively slow, relatively quiet, even the phase immediately before the eruption. Mm-hmm. And we know that in the past, even if there was no civil defense, most of the people survived to the eruption. For example, in Pompeii, just about 10% of the people were killed by the eruption. So the risk could be, as paradox, could be produced by the civil defense if they assume to be able to make a prediction and they are not. So if they say, okay, you can wait, the eruption will not occur tomorrow. So people must be ready at any time for an evacuation.
May I ask also, we have here the specialist, the influencer in the field of sustainability, Dorian. May I ask you a question? Because Dr. Mastrolenza pointed out that so we can practically minimize the consequences of the eruption, for example. How is it, for example, in an economy, and let's say at all in the society, what can we do, and what is the problem now? You also mentioned in our interview where you do see the problems regarding the adaptation and preparation.
Yes. I think that the sustainability is a problem much more complex than simply climate change. Sustainability is something that needs a change in thought. This change in thought is moving from thinking only about profits, about short term, and moving towards long term. This is why I started an organization that is called Long-Term Economy, and it is a blog that unites bloggers all over the world. The mission is to train these bloggers and to make them to think in a long-term perspective. So the platform we have created is an e-learning platform that is training these bloggers to produce, to develop the skill of long-term thinking. So sustainability is something that doesn't concern only climate change, because focusing only on climate change can damage other factors that can concern the environment itself or the society. So this is what we are doing with long-term economy, and this is my contribution to this wonderful debate that has had a lot of wonderful comments and contributions and opinion, and especially technical comments. I have seen a lot of environment, some on volcanology, so I really appreciated it, and I hope all of you can learn something from my organization, from my initiative that you can find by Google long-term economy. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So, spoke about this platform, your idea of uniting bloggers, and this is actually what also already occurring on the platform of АЛЛАТРА, International Public Movement, and as you spoke also about the economy, we come back again to the consumer society, and then one of the biggest and the first problems are the unlimited capitalization. And on 11th of May and the next year on the conference Society is the Last Chance, the question of limitation of capitalization would be the first one, because making this step would solve many problems, such as investing in wars and uncontrolled spending on taxes and the debts of the external debts of countries. So the climate change, the rapid climate change and natural catastrophes, it's not only the events themselves, they cause the global migration, climatic migration, which is not so visible now yet for some of them, some of people, but we see them, for example, in episodes of international releases of climate breaking news made by participants of АЛЛАТRA IPM. And we have today also present the doctor of sociology. This is Dr. Abderrahim Anbi from Morocco. And we would like to hear your opinion on climate change and the cause of it on international and global migration. Hi, Dr. Abderrahim.
Hi.
Hi. Can you hear us?
Yeah.
Just few technical problems is normal.
Yeah. Then I will speak Arabic language. إذن حاولت في هذه أو سأحاول في هذا العمل أن أتحدث عن النزوح في علاقته بالتحولات أو التغيرات المناخية. ونحن نعلم أن القارة الإفريقية من أهم المناطق أو الأكثر مناطق حرارة وجفافا وبالتالي فهي تتعرض
because climate changes, a lot of people are migrating. And because of that, we see difficult life emerging in many continents. Today we have many restrictions which control the movement of people and their mobility, such as borders between countries and laws about foreigners and migrants living in a country. And because of that, it's becoming increasingly difficult to receive access to migration. Research in migration often studies migrants together with the hosting party. And so we have focused on studying migration and the research that communities do in order to understand the ways of access to the general sources of means for existence and realize the following. Migrant is often represented in a negative way, and he is surrounded by negative stereotypes. Morocco, one of the hosting countries because of immigration of foreigners, and actually this led to creation of social representatives to stereotypes and the negative attitude towards foreigners. For instance, migrants from Africa from the border to the south of Sahara are called black or slaves, and Europeans are called Christians, non-believers, homosexuals. Sometimes the epithets directed to a European migrant are less negative, and people are just called a tourist. So it is interesting for us how the hosting party see a migrant. In order to analyze and interpret and understand the conditions for the social's perception and stereotypes, we accept Agadir as the research area and as a hosting party. Methodology of the research. Thanks to the interview with the research participants from the city of Agadir, we learned that behavior of many become the result of these pre-concoctions, pre-notions related to the image, racism, and discrimination of the hosting party. It happened despite the slogans of many associations which highlight that coexistence and saying no to violence was the only way of solving crises and problems related to migration, and with the way of integrating migrants into the process of developing the future of the country. So migration is still a very widespread problem for all the humanities, for all the sciences. During the field interviews with several respondents from Agadir city and also with few Senegal migrants, the following became clear. Most perceptions and pre-concoctions in relation to migrants from the countries to the east of Sahara were very, very negative. The stereotypical opinion of the Moroccan about the migrant was this: he's a thief, he's marginal, he has Ebola, he has HIV, he's impure, he's poor. Respondents told us that migrants to the countries from the countries to the south of Sahara basically are criminals, and they expect theft from criminals, from these migrants. So these migrants are marginalized, despite the fact that while during the interview, one of the respondents saw that the migrant works as a cleaner social service, trying to integrate into society, he says that the migrant from Senegal was a thief. The second respondent said that they, migrants, can develop criminal activity and and they can steal and do some heavy crimes, basically. So from integration to exclusion. The migrant, according to respondents, lives in the marginalized state as a result of exclusion from the social area of the city. And this exclusion is specifically marginalization. This black migrant, based on the reaction of respondents, is can be insulted, he can be revoked, cynicism can be applied to him because it is supposed that his skin color is black, so he's below them in level. Some Moroccans believe that the black people, even if they are not migrants, are people of the second class because of historic events that created stereotypes in the minds of Moroccans since slavery, when the black people were brought from the African countries for work and for other low-quality work. So basically, the black person in the Moroccan culture means a person without work. It's a bad person, and each time, this is what people are saying about him. Climate change emerges the spiritual development of personality. Coexistence is the state in which religious, cultural, language, and ethnic groups and colors are mixing with the feeling of respect to diversity in the situation of dialogue without any violence or conflict. It is necessary to have a compromise formula directed at decreasing conflict inside social groups. All this can be achieved only on the basis of the basic condition, which says that in any geographical region, people have different characteristics, but they have a lot of things in common. And without this, we cannot speak about the society which accepts migrants. So So we must focus on mutual respect of customs, traditions, and identity. The researcher, while describing a racist Moroccan society, calls the society in which the hosting country is not accepting others that are different to them, which actually only made the situation less stable, less sustainable. The so-called ghetto itself creates different social diseases such as theft, begging, the absence of integrating in the society. However, it is up to us to help them be a part of society. And here's a story of the migrant. I came to Morocco 5 years ago. I spent 3 years in Casablanca and 2 years in Agadir. When I was in Casablanca, I was working at a call center, but after that, my presence here stopped being legal. Then I decided to go to a city, to Agadir, to work as a barber, because it was my dream. I received a certificate in this area in institute in Dakar, but I couldn't work there in my country. So I thought, I'll do it in Agadir. I mean, I'm comfortable there. And while looking at the situation, we could see that the migrant changed his strategy under the influence of the environment, where this lady didn't want to work as a call center from the very beginning, but she did that in order to provide for the means of coexistence. So migrant in the future is in the dangerous situation, and it makes us
for this initiative, because it's not. These are volunteers, people learning how to film, how to translate, how to organize this event. So that's why we are all in learning. And I would like to also to say that in the preparation to this conference, we had a wonderful conversation and talk between the Dr. Abderrahim Anbi and Dr. Khalid. Our friends shared their understandings, their ideas on climate change and their consequences for our society, that we really have to change our consumer attitude, that we have to be prepared. And for this purpose, we have to unite. We have to change our way of thinking from consumer to a creative for altruistic one. And they mentioned that, hey, actually our countries on a governmental level, they are like enemies. But we are now talking as friends, and nothing makes us difficult to understand each other and to unite, to really make the contribution for the whole society. And that's why I would like to express my and our big gratitude to all of you and to you, Dr. Anbi. Thank you very much.
Спасибо большое. И мы хотели бы передать слово в Швейцарию Ольге Фолье, невропатологу, и она может поделиться своим опытом, своими
Svetlana Folge, a neuropathologist, and she's present today with us in Naples. Svetlana, hello. Just according to the International Service of Migrants, the number of migrants is over 70 million already. That is, this number is still increasing. And the policy is just aimed to, of course, to decrease the influx of migrants. The elite imposes a negative attitude of the locals towards the migrants. On TV, just mass media, it's been constantly just voiced that how much money the government spends on the migrants. Of course, an ordinary person might think that why should he work just and should pay taxes for the migrants, and supposed that the government is paying migrants benefits. Though in Italy there has been just a document which actually limits, makes the procedure for the residence for migrants difficult. The help for the migrants is evaluated as just anti-legal. And actually, as the consequence, more and more people die on the Middle East region. Until the year of 2019, about 18,000 of people died. And there has been an increase in the number of climatic refugees. And just since January to July 2019, some million people were just forced to leave their homes as a consequence of the climate changes. And the international law does not confirm the legal status of refugees. And the climate refugees can be even forced to leave the country and forced to come back to his either deserted country, as it had happened after the Hurricane Victoria. As the American company just stated that passengers without visa to the US won't be let into the country, and many people were not allowed to enter the country. So while the government doesn't allow the migration, I know lots of examples. Lately, for the recent years, doctors of Switzerland, they prefer to spend their vacations in their refugee camps in Syria, Lebanon, Greece, and just giving help to people who need it. Italian fishermen save the migrants who just try to give by boats to Italy. And the team of Italian just accepted lots of migrants, and they were forced to wait for the allowance to let those migrants go ashore. and the volunteers were waiting already just to give help to those people. So in the modern society, we don't have just the solution of this issue as to the migrants, and the consumer society forms such an attitude, negative attitude towards migrants, and they don't care about lives of foreigners. And we can solve this problem only when we just get rid of the cause of this issue. And the reason for that is actually just the lack of spirituality. And when we change the format of the society onto the constructive one, we would have lots of we would have lots of money just to direct for the better life, for unification of people. Nobody would have to leave their motherland if they have good conditions, if they have decent conditions, work conditions, and just free medicine, free education. So judging by if people have to just leave the territories, these people would receive help. And judging by the volunteers and just decent people who just go against the system and help people who in need. Even today, we have enough people who are ready to live in the constructive society based on the moral principles. Thank you very much.
Светлана озвучила действительно очень вдохновляющий пример волонтеров. Это и доктора, и не специалисты, просто люди, которые просто неравнодушны к ситуации, которой столкнулась Европа, но используются очень многие страны. Если мы говорим о климатической миграции и в целом о резком изменении климата, то это всегда связано с эпидемией. О резком изменении климата, то это всегда связано с эпидемией. Единичный случай или массовый принесли очень много убытков, которые сейчас почти, конечно же, огромное количество жизней. Сегодня доктор из Египта своим видением и мнением о климата и его. Доктор Кай, скажите, слышите нас?
Russian and English. All right. Hello, everybody. It's nice to be with you today. And I'm a doctor, a medical doctor from Cairo, Egypt. So I wanted to talk to you about something that I know, something out of my own experience. And that is about the hospital management system during time of natural disasters. And I would like to start my talk with a quote from Darren Kagan, the former CNN news anchor. He said, "Bad things do happen in the world, like war, natural disaster, and disease. But out of those situations always arise stories of ordinary people doing extraordinary things. And if called, any of us can do extraordinary things." So my talk will be about the natural disaster hospital management, like when a mass casualty situation occurs, using contemporary examples that happened in the past years and some current literature. I will talk about the causes, about the injury patterns, and the triage and preparation, and special consideration for natural disaster mass casualty events that could occur anywhere in the world now. Some of these are like the earth incidents, earthquakes, mudslides, and volcanoes, or wind, as in sandstorms. This is maybe something that you don't know about, what we here suffer from a lot. Hurricanes and tornadoes. Also fires, like wildfires like that happened in Brazil the other day. and temperature extremes, heat waves and winter storms, water incidents like tsunamis, storm surges and floods, and some biological incidents like locust or insect swarms and animal stampedes. But as Giuseppe had mentioned before, we found that the volcanic eruption is unique in that the number of fatalities that usually happens with volcano exceed the number of injuries. Natural disasters also, the problem with it is that it poses unique medical and public response challenges, not only on the people themselves, but on the healthcare professionals that do the job themselves. However, I want to talk about something before I get into this. We know that everybody here in the conference, 100 or more today, they are glued to their seats for hours now following the proceedings, and they want to participate in the game like supporters. So we know each other. We know that we are all definitely united on the same level. We are all brothers and sisters. We are all sprouting from the same universal grain, the same one unique universal grain, from one man, one woman. And we all have some fears. We have expressed a lot of fears and aspiration for the future too. But we know that we are different. We are not like everybody else. We stand apart from the rest of the consumer materialistic world, which is now burdened by toils of war. This world, which is so complicated by its sanguinary conflicts, disturbed by its sharp contradiction, menaced now and then by destructive wars, launched by man to annihilate his fellow brother. And amidst all these ruins, all what man has built and remains of the victims of mankind, there always emerges no victim, nor vanquished. The vanquished will always be man, man himself. Man, God's most sublime creature. Man whom God has created, as Gandhi, the saint of peace, has put it, to trudge on earth, creating life and worshipping God. This is what man's function on earth is. But since we know that it is coming, and we know that we have been talking about our fears, what can happen, the signs of this, the signs of that, what can people do, we don't actually talk about some solid steps that we can take as a movement all together to do something positive. We cannot just stay passive and just talk and express, but we don't plan, we don't devise something to actually come up to an active rule. We have to prepare ourselves for the inevitable. It will come. Natural disasters will continue to happen. It will come. Cataclysm will happen. But what we can do then, we have to be prepared for this. We have to do something. We have to prepare ourselves and our people and the world for it when it comes. What will we do? Because at these times, only unity between everybody, among all people, it's the only thing that can work out. And we can unite, but to do what? Do everything. Because at this time, everyone counts. Everyone had a job. So I will start speaking about my own field of work. This is something that I can talk about, and the healthcare procedures and services during disaster times is a very important thing, and the management of these services and resources are very important things to know about. And I have been in a number of many medical and relief response to natural disasters and the crisis conditions. I have had my share of drills and activation during natural disaster incidents and war zones, conflict zones, and And the hospital, I have seen that hospital and the surrounding communities were rendered non-functional. This is the problem with big incidents like this, is that the healthcare system collapses and everybody is lost. They don't know what to do. They don't find what to use. And I can tell many stories about this, about plans that didn't work, about supplies that were never accessible, about circumstances that happened that were unanticipated. And we can always say that we have plans. We have plans. Yes, we have plans, but we always have great plans. But when we want to carry them out during these difficult times, they don't work. And I would like to mention a word that Mike Tyson said once. He said, "Everybody has a plan until they get punched in the mouth." And yes, we get punched in the mouth quite often. And in this respect, I would like to share with you a couple of incidents that happened during my life with natural disaster, particularly with natural disaster. First was in 1992. A Cairo earthquake occurred at 15:09 hour local time on the 12th of October, 1992. And it had an epicenter near Dahshur, which is just south of the Great Pyramid, like 35 kilometers south of the Great Pyramid. The earthquake had a magnitude of 5.28, but it was unusually destructive. It was the first time we saw this in our lives in Egypt, because at this time it caused 545 deaths and injured about 6,512, and 50,000 people were homeless, were rendered homeless because of this. It was the most damaging seismic event that happened to Cairo since 1847. And all of these deaths and the injuries were not because of the magnitude of the earthquake itself. It's because people were not prepared for it, and people got chaotic and they didn't know what to do and they just hurt themselves, and this is why they died and this is why they injured at this time. Even a big rock from the Great Pyramid itself fell down. I remember. And at this time, I was just still a freshman in medical school. I wasn't even a doctor yet. A long way to be a doctor, but I was in a many volunteering association. And at this time, I was in the Red Crescent, which is the equivalent of the Red Crescent. And I went with the volunteers, and we worked hard for many days. And it was horrible. What I saw was very horrible. But it was education. We learned a lot. I have here some photos of these incidents that maybe the moderator will show it. But if it cannot be shown here, maybe it will be shown after. And also, I would like to speak about my second incident, which was in just recently in 2016. There was a flooding that happened to Egypt on the east borders of Egypt on the Red Sea in Ras Gharib. Ras Gharib is a oil drilling city on the sea, and it's a town which has few thousand residents there. And on the 26th and the 27th of October in 2016, floods came down from the mountains of eastern Egypt and fell down and took the whole town in its way. And I had friends living in this city, engineers, oil engineers, with their families, and they were rendered homeless. Many of them were injured, and they lost everything. So at this time, I just took my my people from the hospital, and I scrounged up all what I could of blankets, tents, food, and medical supplies, and we went there to help these people. It was also a very strange experience, but was also, it was also very educational, because we knew at this time that we are not prepared. The country itself, the government was not prepared for this thing, and because of this, people suffer. I also have some picture of this that can be shown maybe later, but let's talk about what can we do to plan for disasters like this. Hospital planning for natural disaster response should stress anticipation of potential damage to the physical plant, because hospitals themselves can be damaged, and the preparation to the limit effect on the ability for the hospital to function after the event, not only during the event. And the one most important characteristic of this operation is resilience. Resilience is very important. Resilience should be sought in a natural disaster response plan, any plan, because we have to develop multiple redundant options, not only one place or one plan. There has to be always plan A, B, C, D, and etc. Because usually first plan, second plan, they don't work. So you have always to have options, more options. And your supplies, you should not concentrate it in one place. During normal time, okay, centralization of resources are fine. You can have your place with all your medical supplies.
You're right. I'm sorry for interruption, because you were talking about really serious topics, and these are very important observations. If I may conclude that actually the half of the problems, the preparation would really solve, such as evacuation plans and informing people in advance. So not just a few minutes before the event or after, let's say after the event, but really they need time. And for that, we need a better scientific researchers. We need a better involvement of the whole society, because it's not only the work of the scientists, it's our responsibility as a society at all. And you also mentioned that during these events also professionals are dying. That means that not so many people are there to provide professional aid and to serve people. So that's why it's absolutely important topic, and we know that on ALLATRA platform will be also one of the next conferences dedicated to the topic of a medical care in the constructive society, and we know that you're also there a participant, and that is why we will be happy to see you there. Thank you very much. We are really happy to see you. Thank you. We have also the citizen of Napoli from Italy, Luca, who is here, and he is also eyewitnesses of natural disasters.
Hello, everybody. Yes, I wanted, after hearing all this history, especially from our previous colleague from Cairo, I would just give you my examples in a few moments. But before giving the example, it's important to understand that I want to give them in the light of understanding that after all we hear, what is the most important thing that I believe, based on my experience, we need to do in order to be ready for such kind of situation that could happen, are coming, and they're gonna happen, and they can happen any time, any moment in our life, like we hear, is to change completely, as we hear, the vector of the society, because all the discussion that we are hearing are going in that direction, that if we don't change the vector of society, we heard from our other speakers, I mean the vector of consumism, the vector of accumulation of only money, to make money even after disaster, let's say. And by the way, disaster is one of the best event that can happen to the people that want to make money. Every war is a very, very good reason after the war, to make a lot of money. And I want to give this example to understand what happens in real situation, because being a citizen of Napoli, like you said, I have experience of these things on life, and this I can tell you change you. You live this experience and you are changed forever in your life. You gain some values. My first experience with serious, quite serious earthquake, it's from 1980. I was 10 years old and I lived the earthquake in Napoli. Actually, the center was, I think, 100 kilometers from here, a region called Irpinia. The numbers are scary, 3,000 casualties, 7.1 Richter, I don't know, several 100,000 people without homes. So it was really big earthquake. But this is not what I wanted to talk about. I wanted to talk about what happens in my personal experience. In the first moment, what it was very, very different from the day-to-day life is that we get all united. In that occasion. In the specific place in which my father was living, we were getting out of our flat and we were all living in our cars. Because for some reason our collective, I don't know, conscience was telling us that it was dangerous to be at home, or we were afraid maybe to be at home. But in that moment we got united, people were organized automatically to help each other, who needed that, who wanted some food, who had some, heart attack because was very scared and something like that. And this was lasting for the first few days. So these memories are very good. I remember also that we have looked in the eyes of our neighbor first time after many, many years, and we could have time to talk, because after it was a bit quiet. Yes, there were other, not only one earthquake, there was one very, very strong, then in the night a second one again strong, and so on. So we were scared all period. So that this fear was getting us united. But as you know, the fear is not a very good thing to unite people. And what happens after the history of this earthquake, in the sense of the relationship with people, that there was many damage, like I was saying before. And in the mentality of my city, unfortunately, somebody was waiting for the reconstruction, was not doing a lot of effort by ourselves to restore what's going on. And this creates flow of money, interest, business, and there are some absurd situations that I know personally for my relatives. That some houses were rebuilt after 30 years. So can you imagine? It's really, and the flow of money was, if we were putting there 100 euros, I take an example, in these houses, to the house was going 2 euros in the end of the day, because of, you can imagine what was happening. And this is, so this example is bad and good. In order not to have only such kind of example, I have different one that was a flood. Like we were saying before, you have a collection of this experience in your life when you are from Italy. This is from the north of Italy. In this case, the flood was not a big one in 2014 in a region close to Modena and these parts. In this situation, what happens? The flood was not like, if we compare to the event that we can see today, what we heard before, really serious. I mean, there's always but the life were in danger. People lost their houses, enterprises, and hospital were destroyed. But what happened in this thing? The first part of my experience was the same like what I described before. People get united because of fear. They immediately help each other, and this prevents more life to be lost, and people are helped. But that's the first part. What is more interesting is that in this situation, people continued helping each other even later. And I will come back to why this happened in this particular area. People started not waiting for nothing to restore what was destroyed by the flood, and in a very, very good order, I would say. Good, what does it mean? Before they started rebuilding places in which could be sheltered, the people were losing their houses or given aid. Then they started restoring hospitals and so on. Third, they started restoring their own company. I mean, their own is not the personal company, but the workers who together with owners were building a back company to be able to keep living like they were living before. And in what I want to say, that in a very, very short time compared to other situations, everything was coming back to normal after the thing was gone. Why this was happening? Because there is one beautiful thing, let's say, of that part of Italy, in that the society is very social. I don't know how to say in a different way. People there are very caring about the general wellness, helping each other. It's very, very common in that part of Italy. And is also given by the special type of economy that is in that part of Italy. I think that's my opinion. I'm not an economist, but I say like an opinion, which because that part of Italy, there are a lot of very, very family enterprises. And when you have a lot of small family enterprises, the relationship between is like with people to people. It's not by a big company and a small guy working for that. So it's personal. And so the most important value most of the time for these enterprises is not the profit, but are the people working for them and the wealth for everybody. So my conclusion here that I want to give, that when you have things going in the direction of what we are telling in our discussion, what we hear from I don't know how to translate Peredache now, in the translation of Igor Mikhailovich Danilov, is that if we go in the direction of the collective, creative and constructive society, we will be automatically ready or better equipped in the case of we have such kind of flaws. That's the experience that I wanted to share. Thank you.
Based on human values such as love, unity, and not tolerance, but the friendship. And this is what we actually experience here in Italy. And thank you very much for hosting this conference here. We appreciate really your welcomeness and friendship. I'm sorry. Maybe you can better say it in Italy. How to say
ringrazio tutti sono tutti molto contenti dell'organizzazione, ci hanno ringraziato della nostra ospitalità, che è una delle caratteristiche del popolo napoletano, diciamo così.
Спасибо большое, Лука. Мы хотели передать слово Шону Бруксу, антропологу. Спасибо большое, Лука. Мы хотели передать слово Шону Бруксу.
Now I would like to give the floor to Sean Brooks from the USA, who would like to tell us about the climate refugees.
Hi. Can you guys hear me okay? Can you guys hear me okay? Great. So I wanted to bring up the topic that I feel is very important from the standpoint, we've heard a lot of opinions about the West and the United States and their role in climate change. And from our perspective, capitalism is king. The anthropogenic factor is inherently based on a consumer format of society that implies human actions are due to our current economic system and our wasteful habits. Thank you. Okay, can you guys see me? Okay, can you guys see me? Okay, sorry about that. So the most fundamental question that many people in the United States consider is whether capitalism or the capitalistic society is capable of sharply reducing carbon emissions or curbing climate change in any significant way. So the main focus, as we've heard from other speakers, is the reducing of the overall CO2 being released into the atmosphere, not a rapid policy or infrastructure change that is needed to adapt and address our contributions to climate change or on human life. We've seen suggestions of using nuclear weapons to stop hurricanes, which is just another example of our complete disconnect from nature and human life in general. Right now, there's a massive investment, of course, by 2030 to keep the warming below 1.5 degrees Celsius, like inferred. But many scientists have already agreed that we've crossed into a dangerous unexplored territory. In order to really avoid catastrophic and irreversible climate change, we would need to curb those emissions right away. But I want to make the distinction between preparation for cataclysms and the anthropogenic influence on climate change. We know that the Earth is moving through space and there are many cycles upon which we cannot control. We cannot fight earthquakes, we cannot fight hurricanes. However, the humans do contribute to climate change in the fact that we massively deforest our forest, which is a sink for holding in CO2, of course. The pollution of our oceans is increasingly raise the level of the acidification, which also helps regulate those natural CO2 systems. And the United States has, made some efforts to invest in alternative energy sources, because from their perspective, the only viable solution to climate change is one that includes a capitalistic, something that is based on profit, and not really a long-term sustainable system. In order for capitalism to really help, we would need a radical realignment of our economy, which would also mean a radical realignment of our political system and our fundamental human nature. What should be done also for the number of poor people and neglected communities, both in the United States and abroad, that stand to suffer the most from the coming changes. A lot of these issues we talk about are from a perspective of privilege, meaning that we are developed nations, and so we can have these conversations, whereas other less developed nations cannot necessarily have these conversations because they lack the resources to address these issues head on. It's not theoretical anymore that climate change is hitting the world. Just recently, Hurricane Dorian was prepared to hit the southeastern United States and the Bahamas, bringing damaging winds, extreme floods, and loss of homes and loss of life. Leading up into proceeding to this disaster, however, people were preparing for the storm by helping each other evacuate, helping getting the older residents out of their home, and then afterwards helping to rebuild. And as Luca mentioned, we do see humans in these times of great need and in times of disaster showing their true nature, showing their capacity to love and care for each other and to help each other out in these times of disaster. Here in Indiana, we have winters that have been getting progressively colder, lasting almost 1 or 2 months or longer each year, with our cold temperatures here in the Midwest over the past 5 years have matched those in Siberia and northern Canada. Our roads freeze over very quickly, and due to lacking infrastructure, we have a lot of highway road accidents, which claim many lives every year. But also in the same sense, we have people showing incredible examples of humanity and getting out there in the cold and the blizzard and helping each other out of ditches or helping people who are stuck in cars. Last Friday, we saw the biggest youth protest held in the United States that I have seen in my lifetime, that was organized entirely by the young kids of our community to fight against climate change, or to call for climate action by our politicians and our ruling elite. I haven't seen, again, that sort of reaction from them since the mass shootings that happened, the protests that happened last year. And on top of that, we have a refugee problem or an immigration problem, which from my perspective has been framed as a problem of gang violence and economic disaster, when in actual fact, these people in Central and South America are losing their jobs and due to crop shortages because of extreme droughts and fungal outbreaks that are killing the national economy. So they have no other choice but to move to places either in Central America or to the United States or Canada or abroad. But other reasons are being put forward to distract us from the inevitable truth. In order to face this issue head on, we need to reevaluate our relationship to ownership, work, and capital. The impact of dramatic reconfiguration of the industrial economy requires similarly large changes to the human being. Because basic incomes, large-scale public work programs, and everything else in between has to be implemented if we are able to adapt and deal with the coming cataclysms, and not to mention the result of our own pollution and disregard for nature. Many would say that capitalism as we know it is completely inept when it comes to addressing climate change. And the redemption can only be found in the capacity for transformative change towards sustainability. But we can't put a price on emissions. We can't reduce emissions until we adapt another way of society that isn't based on wasteful consumerism. Some argue that we can stop climate change under capitalism, letting the market work for the environment, between emphasizing our capitalism's capacity for self-correction, price incentives. For instance, we've heard like countries getting price incentives for lowering their CO2 emissions by a certain point. But these issues or these so-called solutions are, well, they won't work. There's an unresolved conflict between capitalism and its drive for growth and economic sustainability or ecological sustainability that is necessary for climate stability, which means that one has to collapse in order for the other to succeed. We created these very institutions, yet we act as if they're unchangeable or somehow superpositioned over our lives, independent entities even. We talk about capitalism as if it's some sort of God over us. We see our problems outside of the realm of our own manipulation, and we stand by and watch as the world unravels because we tie our hands behind these institutions. Many of us are waiting for a magic bullet or a magic person to come and save us all, and we can put ourselves so we can keep having the same comfortable life of technology and comfort. But there's no reasoning here. There is no rational argument or blandishment that has a remote chance of success when it comes to capitalism and its ability to save climate change. If this is indeed the type of conversation we are having when it comes to the climate impasse, then we need to be honest and appropriate about the course of treatment that humans need to take. Spiritual and moral values must be the remedy to this problem. Anything else is simply not enough. We need to educate our children in the proper way to let them know that climate change is not happening solely because of man, but because of its cyclicity of the planets, and that we cannot influence climate in the reverse direction. It's impossible. But we must be prepared, first of all, for adaptation, be prepared for mass migration due to climate change and natural disasters, and be prepared on how to live peacefully with each other when we are all living in possibly very uncomfortable situations, and to love oneself and other human beings and all things on earth. This is the only solution to climate change, not capitalism. This is the only solution to climate change, not capitalism.
Thank you very much, Sean. Шон также упомянул о том, что сейчас действительно миграцию, которая происходит с Латинской Америки на территорию США, что не всегда это экономические какие-то причины или, скажем, другие, которые выгодны. Показывать это именно под такой перспективой, в таком ключе, что действительно уже сейчас люди вынуждены...
This respect. So basically people now have to leave their homes due to climate change. Because
Ashon has mentioned
it is very difficult for them
to leave their country. And
it is very difficult for them to...
These are the people who actually just work in agricultural sector, and today we have
Antonio Flores from Ecuador.
Hello, Antonio.
Hola, ok. ¿Cómo están? ¿Pueden escucharme? ¿Está bien?
Oh, you can hear me?
Okay.
I can speak a little bit. I would like to tell you, my name is Antonio Flores. I come from Ecuador. Before, just to talk about...
And before talking about agriculture, about farmers, when I started studying as an engineer, I studied agriculture, how we can plant seeds, and this is to have enough resources for nature. And when I started my studies, my teachers also told me that we have 10 years remaining until climate change, which would be unreversible. So after graduation, I started working based in my profession, and I started studying climate change. So I monitored climate, and we were quite shocked.
Me sorprendía que no podíamos hacer un pronóstico del tiempo que realmente afiance para que se pueda producir bien. En la actualidad es triste poder observar.
Now it's quite sad for me to see fields.
He vivido en el campo y sé el sufrimiento y el dolor de cómo muchas veces genera.
People are very sad.
El hecho de que no tengamos.
People are worried about the fact that there are a lot of toxic pesticides, and there are also very many droughts, and this is very worrisome. And so now the question of technology arises. What technologies exist? We cannot rely fully on the technologies that exist at the moment. But at the same time, if we don't have enough land, enough fertile land, we don't have enough certainty in the fertility of our land. What I'm trying to say is that if some disaster occurs, we will be unable to provide us with medicine or professional abilities. And all the services, including medical service, we won't be unable to provide us with the basic things that what supports life, food. Speaking about tourism, this is also very worrisome for many people, and such people like you, people from Alatra, can share and make a lot of contribution. So we cannot sit twiddling thumbs. We must have means for food. We don't have time for. So I can continue eating the right food. But at the same time, it's not very easy for me to do it in all countries. And so basically, in the country, it is easier to find more organic food, while in big cities it is more difficult to find this organic food. Earth gives us a lot of opportunities to wake up. And we are unable to we shift our responsibility and we depend on the people who have to solve our problems. And we are not making contribution ourselves. So we are not making effort to change agriculture, and we must get back to technology, so thank you very much for your attention.
Las consecuencias ahora son muy difíciles para poder comprenderlas para toda la sociedad. Muchas veces el cambio simplemente de continentes nos ciega de un montón de cosas que están pasando. Nos ciega de muchas maneras.
So now changing the entire world.
La alimentación para nosotros, tiempo para los que vienen, un tipo de alimentación en los que nosotros podamos ser sostenibles y ser soberanos de nuestra alimentaria.
Basically, we can, we as consumers of agriculture products can find a self-sustaining way of consuming. In other words, we see a lot of stereotypes and we see a lot of obstacles that prevent us from using alternative sources, and we must destroy these dogmas, so on.
Sin darse cuenta que todos tenemos que conseguir una sola unificación en todo.
Muchas gracias a ti y a nuestros amigos de habla hispana por vuestro apoyo y participación activa. And we see how much people have to say. That's very wonderful because you see that there's so a lot of topics we have to discuss regarding the climate change. And we have here two more participants from USA, Olga Simpson and Olga Schmidt. So you're welcome. Olga, are you ready? So, с нами Ольга Симпсон, она инженер-конструктор, и Ольга Шмидт является техником МРТ. Вы готовы?
Нас слышно? Вы нас слышите?
Да.
Да, ага. Вы знаете, сегодня я хотела бы поговорить на такую тему, что в данный момент у нас во всем мире... Ага. Вы знаете, сегодня я хотела бы поговорить на такую тему, что...
Today I'd like to talk about the fact that we have a problem with violence nowadays, and the participants of the movement now initiate the project called No Violence in Family and Society. We hear about violence. We hear that violence is flourishing all around. We hear this from our friends, from our colleagues, what we observe on TV. The world is overwhelmed with violence, and it's a whole problem for our society. And there is such a point that when this happens in our society, what I'd like to say is that America seems to be a well-developed country economically, and people tend to think that there is no problems with violence. But in actual fact, this is not true. Violence is flourishing in all countries, regardless of the economic development. And if this happens between family members, between friends, between some employees, colleagues, everything is flourishing, then what will take place when mass migration will start? How we will live together? When a Morocco professor mentioned already that people form a negative attitude towards migrants, and migrants also have a negative attitude of the country which is hosting them. And I'd like to say that this image is imposed on us by mass media, and we have to clarify whom a migrant is. To me, there was such an impression previously that a migrant is some kind of an enemy, before I actually clarified that these are normal humans with very complex destiny. They have to abandon their homes, they have to resettle, relocate to a different continent. Sometimes they don't even know the language. They have face unfriendly atmosphere. So first of all, I'd like to say that in every situation, a human should remain a human and manifest his best qualities. He should help, he should support other person. And you know, this sprout of goodness is spread, is inherent in us. We have to just plant it and water it with our deeds. We have to treat another person just the same as we would like to be treated in complex situations especially. And you know, the main point is not to forget about the value of human life, because this is priceless. And when we have such a situation, when every person will be a friend to another one, then our society will flourish and we will live in mutual respect, love, and kindness and happiness. Thank you. Thank you very much. Can you see us? Yes, thank you. Good. Also to add that we now see that in some countries there is such a practice as building a wall, and for the country leaders it's the only logical solution. But we understand that this is not a way out. This takes place because of lack of way out. People despair. Building such walls separates people. And those who want, they still can dig something under the wall or can cross the wall, because you cannot border the whole country with the walls. In the history of humankind, there were walls which were built, but they didn't help to solve problems for humanity. What is kind of society we have where we lack finance, we lack funds to solve the problem of famine, to create, to maintain friendship between each other, but we have funds in order to kill and to protect from others. Do we really want this? And where this will lead us? Only to self-destruction. So let's change something. The problem of climate and climate migration is discussed at the level of ministries of defense and leaders of countries. So from the point of view of military threats and security, this is what today's consumer society have come up to. So let's imagine what will happen in a constructive and creative society. Let's invent a story about some unified service, which security service, which was voiced on the conference of 22nd of June 2019. This service would help to maintain security on the earth for every nation, for all people, but not on a separate territory. The whole sense of the constructive and creative society is that there should be no artificial economic crisis or political crisis. Constructive and creative society means solution of problems, because you don't have to conquer anything. Everything should be and can be resolved peacefully without any war. A great amount of money today and resources are spent on wars and defense. And what do we spend on peace? Let's change this. Let's not kill and protect from each other, but let's help and let's save lives of each other, because life is the real value. And for this, on the ALLATRA platform, we carry out such conferences. And let's unite all together. On 9th of May 2020, we'll get together all over the world in order to resolve how to live further and what kind of a society we want to build, because we can do everything. Thank you. Thank you very much. Friends, our game is coming to its end. We would like to give the floor to the next game of professionals on economics. which will take place in Moscow on 12th of October. And the topic of this game will be Economics of Constructive and Creative Society, Abolition of Loan Interest. Please join. I also like to add that I would like to thank all participants who are now visible on the screen, who have joined us online. This is a great deed which we are doing. The problems which we have discussed are mostly the problems of the consumer society, consumer format in society. And as a result, we see the situation that our science lacks resources and solutions to prevent and try to solve the issues which we can arise in the nearest future. We still don't have a working system for all people, how to notify about the cataclysms which have already happened. We don't know how evacuation will take place. We've heard about our speakers, but they say, everybody says, what can we do in several seconds? We heard that in medicine, in healthcare, these are problems and issues which we have to be prepared for. We still have some time to use it rationally, because disasters are taking place very fast. And our specialists already say that humanity have undergone such situations. Every 12,000 years, we have undergone the same situation on Earth. There are artifacts, there are records of such situations. We remember that. But what we'll do when the upcoming cataclysms will happen, and how the society can get prepared for that? Will human life be valued, or will be fighting for survival as animals? We have to voice the problems that relate to agri sector, because the climate is changing very fast, and it's impossible to grow many cultures and plants anymore, which people used to plant for hundreds and thousands of years. People have no time to adapt to new changes. And the whole range of issues which we have covered, it doesn't relate directly to... We can create conditions, we can create the constructive and creative, altruistic society, friendly society, where everyone are friends. And Dr. Mastrolenko has also voiced his desire and a desire of all specialists in climate, on all people, that this is possible. But today, our game of professionals is mostly not a game. We really don't have time to play anymore, because today our lives are being played by those who are not ready to change. But we have to make this step towards creative and constructive society. That's why on the ALLATRA platform we conduct such conferences on various topics, which can be joined by specialist experts from many fields. And we kindly invite to participate. We kindly invite everyone to participate. Thank you. Giuseppe.
Giuseppe, would you like to say a few words to all our audience, to all people sitting here, just from your heart, what you would like to share?
It is very nice. Everything
also, all the soul, the people. So I hope I was talking with her and say probably all the change of mind could be simply a matter of human evolution, but probably in some way action of people around the world to look for a solution of this problem. So how to communicate not only the risk, but only the which must be the trend for the worldwide trend for the people in a way which consider not only the business or the personal interest, the personal advantage, but the advantage the planet, of the universe, but this far from or the planet, including all the life of this planet, and from the geology to the animals, so people must consider this moment, also the future. So the ethic must consider also our action in terms of effect for future generation, not only for the human species, but also for all other species and for the planet in its totality.
Thank you very much.
Thank you
everyone. Thank you. See you soon. До свидания. Всем большое спасибо.
Включаем.